Moscow American back. And my preliminary apologies. I am planning to pick a different route. I had a friend over, and in true Russia style, last night, when meeting with a good friend, we ended up talking till like 1 a.m. before we were done. And so that kind of threw the whole schedule this morning of me getting ready for my doing my research, all that kind of stuff. So I'm kind of falling back on my old trusty route that's right nearby. Still gets me through some good areas of nature. So it's a good old trusty place to go to. Makes it easy. Anyway, starting with some news here. So Johnson, right? House Speaker, right? All that kind of stuff. He recently went on a trip to the West Bank. And during his trip, I think he was, referenced it as something like a integral frontline part of Israel, and referenced the area as Judea. Oh boy, this doesn't bode well. So a little context here. Ever since 1967, the U.S. has kind of avoided having high-level officials visit this area because by international law, it is the Israeli settlements are illegal occupation, and it's not recognized as part of Israel. And referencing it as Judea is pulling on the, I guess you could say, traditional Jewish names for that area, right? Pulling back on sort of biblical terminology. So yeah, now we have high-level people going there and kind of aiming at making these type of statements. So it's not enough that they're going after all of Gaza. Oh yeah, that's the other piece of news, right? They're getting reports coming out now saying that Netanyahu is just planning to push through opposition in Israel, and any lingering, I guess you say, political opposition as wanting to just occupy all of Gaza. So, not only are we going to occupy all of Gaza, but now we're having high-level U.S. officials start dropping these kind of interesting hints about the West Bank too. Ooh, not good. I also have to appreciate all this kind of Republican kind of tying back to some sort of perceived strength of their sort of dispensational base. This whole support Israel, they have to have back their land. I must make a passing comment on that. First off, I come from a religious background. I'm a Christian. But none of this makes any sense, even from a religious perspective, right? The Israelites, if you look back at the Old Testament prophets, God drove them into exile, Babylonian exile, right? Because of their unfaithfulness. They broke his laws, they broke his commandments, they broke his covenant. And everyone likes to pull out, right, Moses, right, the promises that God's going to give them that land. But the book of Joshua does say that after they went in the land, all the promises were fulfilled. And so now there are God's people in that land. But later on, we see the sort of obvious corollary to that promise of the land given to Abraham is they have to be his people and be faithful. Otherwise, they can lose that land. And God did take that land from them, drove them into exile, and brought them back from Babylonian exile because of their repentance, right? Their turning unto them, him being faithful and letting them repent and bringing them back. Okay, so for any non-religious people out there, so there it is, there's this promise. They get the land, but they have to be God's people and follow his law. So the law is pretty strict. Okay, so if you're a Christian then, Christ comes, the Jews crucify him, and he is the fulfillment of all of this prophecy, all of what Israel's leading to. So God's already disinherited them from the land in the past because of major acts of disobedience. They then kill the incarnate God, the Son of God on earth. So they commit the greatest act of cosmic betrayal ever, disloyalty ever. And then they lose the land, right? AD 70, they're destroyed by the Romans. There's another revolt in the 2nd century, kind of finishes off. So most of Israel's dispersed. Most of the Jews are all over the four corners of the earth. That's why there's all this, diaspora everywhere. It makes no sense. They committed the ultimate act of rebellion against God. And in the past, when they rebelled, he took the land. Why is it now that every Christian is sitting here saying they have a right to that land? On top of it, the modern state of Israel, supports LGBTQ, all sorts of homosexuality, abortion, every single thing of the types of things they were disinherited for and lost all right to the land for in the Old Testament itself. So even if you're not Christian, even if you're just Jewish, right? A lot of the hardcore traditional Orthodox Jews actually don't support Israel. At least they didn't once upon a time. They were opposed to Zionism because they're like, well, no, losing the land was a punishment and we haven't repented. So anyway, that's my rant on why this sort of conservative Republican support for it makes no logical sense. Like, at all. Even within the religious structure it's based on. At all. And then I'm going to throw in one last piece of this rant is from a non-religious perspective, right? They need to have back their homeland or something like that. Okay, fine. By any sort of historical dating if you have like historians and all taking into account the biblical accounts of Moses leading the people out of Egypt, them going into the promised land, going into where is now modern day Israel and Palestine. Okay, you have debates on when these people entered this area and took it over. Sometimes you'll hear, I think I've heard like around 1300 BC to 1100 BC. Okay. A large part of them are taken away by the Assyrians, 700 years later, leaving just Judea. They get taken away by the Babylonians, then return. And then they have this revolt against the Romans, 70 AD. Okay, so let's say from 1100 BC, 70 AD, they've been in there 1100 years, maybe 1200 years max. You give them the 1300, okay, maybe they're there up to almost 1400 years. Okay, that's 2,000 years ago. They've been gone from there longer than they ever had that land. And the people who are there now, you could argue the case that some of their ancestors have now been there far longer than any Jews were ever in that land. It doesn't even make mathematical sense at this point. It's kind of a point that I'm almost annoyed hearing because no one even puts it in any sort of historical context. Even by their own timeline, even by their own historical timeline, it doesn't quite add up. All right, moving on from that. Took a little bit of a side trip there trying to go down what looked on my map like a little path, but it is so overgrown and steep. I was like, nope, back to the old route. I got covered in briars and everything else, so back to the normal path. I was trying to find somewhere to mix it up a little for the footage, but no go. Anyway, time for the big story though going on came out yesterday. I think it was Reuters broke the story that's buried in this, I think it was the DHS documents, their policy documents and all, was this discussion of disaster relief funding for states in the U.S. Federal disaster relief funding. Or $1.9 billion for federal disaster relief funding. And their guidelines were that they were going to withhold funding from states that didn't support Israel. So if you had states that were trying to boycott Israel, that was the big one, right? Looks like it was sort of focused on sort of the BDS movement, right? What'd that stand for? It was like boycott, divestment, sanctions. This sort of movement to put economic pressure on Israel, right? Trying to get like states, lawmakers, cities, places like that to cut off some of their business relations with Israel until they back off on some of the stuff with Gaza. Stop committing as many human rights violations, all these kinds of things, right? Well, DHS is wanting that to kind of be lumped under some sort of anti-hate laws, anti-Semitism, right? If you don't support Israel, you're apparently anti-Semitic. Though Middle Eastern people who they're killing are also technically Semitic. So supporting Israel might be thought of as anti-Semitic if we really want to be pedantic. Anyway, so yeah, it looks like this stuff was sort of aimed at pressuring to make sure all the different states out there push through these sort of laws and all that would consider it, some sort of hate or something to do this. Try to pressure all this stuff out, right? No one's going to be opposed. No one can be in favor of cutting off economic ties with Israel, right? Yay for freedom. So, they broke the story. I actually initially saw it on like the Jerusalem Post. They were doing like a victory lap about it, just about seemed. But yeah, Reuters originally broke the story. And man, did not get a positive reaction because I think we were up for record time backtracking from Trump. Because apparently now Reuters' follow-up story is, as of today, the guidelines have been re-released and no reference to this anymore. I wonder if they're in the unwritten guidelines. I wonder if it's still de facto what it is. So anyway, what's so angering about this whole thing is just, well, a few things. One, how much America First stuff did we have to hear? How much did we have to hear, right? All this betrayal of America, that they're putting other countries first. But now, literally, disaster relief. You have a hurricane come through, kill people, all this kind of stuff. And you don't get help if your state or city didn't support a foreign nation. You're being treated with the basic protection afforded to American citizens is dependent on your support of a foreign nation. I really don't want to ever hear America First from Trump ever again at this point. What the heck? All right. There's that. And then I'm also just gonna, for fairness sake, remind everyone, we were living just outside Charlotte, so I remember very well last year, coming up in election season, all the hurricane damage up there in the mountains and the massive scandal. Because it appeared that the Biden administration was less than speedy or enthusiastic to help these areas that tended to be more Republican. Almost like it just wasn't as much of a priority. There's even a scandal somewhere in Florida with some of the disaster relief stuff where, there were some leaked documents that may look like at least some people were intentionally doing this kind of stuff. So yeah, that even factored in, I would say, to the election, right? Because there was a lot of anger over that. That seemed that this is how politicized it was. Whether or not you get help from your government was, based on your political party and who you support. And this is scandalous because the government is supposed to protect all its citizens. Tell me this is not just as bad or worse. Tell me. Oh my goodness. So, yeah, that's where we're at. Israel First. We're gonna rename it instead of Make America Great Again. Make Israel stay being number one forever. No more Make America Great. Just keep Israel number one in Washington. Meanwhile, Witkoff, I think he just got here to Moscow not too long ago. And he actually made it this time because there was actually a video going around showing him arriving. So, yeah, haven't been down this way. Similar to some of the other trails I've been to, so I'm sure it looks about the same. Anyway, though, so apparently, even the mainstream media is kind of admitting that situation in Ukraine is kind of hopeless for the West. Sort of between the lines. It was, I want to say Reuters put out a story just recently kind of talking about the prospects of this upcoming meeting here. Whoops. Sure, I just got it all cockeyed there for a second on the camera here, but I was looking it up here. Yeah. So Reuters was kind of giving their appraisal of the situation. What's going to happen and all. And, sorry here. Yeah, their appraisal, right? Putin's not likely to care or react to the ultimatums. Putin, from their point of view, they're summing up the situation. This is, as Western media as it comes. He's certain of victory. And he probably doubts that the new sanctions will have any effect. The General Staff of the Russian Federation has told him that the Ukrainian front is probably going to collapse in the next 2 to 3 months. In this case, they think that, he doesn't want to necessarily tick off Trump, but, because it's not going to exactly, he doesn't want to completely mess up relations, but he's also not going to back down. So, even the Western media is like their appraisal of what Putin's thinking and what his math, his calculus is that he's winning. Front lines are going to collapse in a couple of months. So, no chance of backing down. And, for all the times we've been saying how Russia didn't have a chance, all this American weaponry was going to carry the day, all this stuff, right? The relentless wall of propaganda. This is definitely a change of pace here. Not where I thought I was going to end up. Around the edge of the construction area out here. Putting in, looks like a water pipe. Go this other way. So, definitely a change of pace and a change of tune going on right now. But they are still trying to spin it. The 5,000 sanctions package doesn't work. Let's try 5,000 more, right? There was a French journalist. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, Outrage, who is putting out his appraisal this upcoming visit and saying, meanwhile, French journalist Outrage put out an appraisal this upcoming trip recently. So there's some people still hanging on to the propaganda line, right? If it doesn't come true for you, just keep saying it until it does come true, right? If you repeat a lie long enough and persistently enough, it'll become true, right? This was his take. This trip shows that Trump is ready to give Putin one last chance. Witkoff's mission is to probe the Kremlin's position and find out if Putin is willing to make a deal and end the hostilities. However, there is no certainty that Trump's emissary will be able to move the situation from a deadlock. Yeah, I thought we were moving past this deadlock stalemate position when we already had, I think it was Budanov, right? The, intel chief, right? From the, military intelligence department in Ukraine saying, they're basically screwed. When you have so many Western media outlets basically saying, Prokhorovsk, this key city, is barely hanging on. Or my favorite was that CNN article kind of saying, how they haven't been making any gains, but these tiny incremental gains have added up. And they're losing tons of ground around the key city of Prokhorovsk. So, the keeping the story straight and all hasn't looked much like gridlock for a good while. I love how way back when, right, when there was the big Ukrainian counteroffensive around Kharkov, how that was such big news that they'd recaptured all of this land from Russia. Over this last year, Russia's taken back all of that land and then some, but all of that's tiny, unimportant gains, just these tiny incremental little gains. So for Ukraine, it was a huge deal, but when Russia takes that ground, it's just, it's inconsequential. Yeah. There's supposed to be a place somewhere down here where you can actually see a little bit of a nice little waterfall, but I haven't found it yet. I'm not entirely certain where I'm going, so we'll find out. So, one thing I've been seeing going around a lot on Russian news is this discussion. I think it was Russian intelligence, released this report saying that there is going to be a false flag operation by Western powers, something to do with NATO, on Russia's shadow fleet. So the claim I was hearing was that there's going to be, maybe an attempt to damage or destroy a ship, and then maybe cause some sort of ecological disaster. Maybe you're dumping oil all in the water somewhere. And then they can use that as a basis to start saying, well, this shadow fleet, these ships are dangerous, whatever. They can start being seized out on the high seas. Interesting. I don't know. It's an intel report. I know it's out there for a reason. I mean, it might be outright true in the sense that that is the actual plan. It could also be preemptive. It could actually be that they're putting this report out there saying, don't get any wild ideas, because now that you put this out there, if something then happens exactly as they warned and predicted, their intel statements put out, it won't look good, right? So you put this out there, and it kind of undermines the ability to carry out any shenanigans in this way, whether or not that's the actual exact plan or not. So I don't know. I'm kind of suspicious that this might not be the actual exactly concrete plan, but it's sort of a preemptive report, because maybe there's some chatter or some news out there kind of suggesting that they're wanting to do something about the oil tankers, the mysterious, terrifying shadow fleet. We'll see. I'm sure they're wanting to do something. I'm just curious if their plan is actually exactly like this intel report said, or if this intel report is just trying to head off whatever might be happening, regardless of whether or not that's the actual thing. There you go. Got a little bit of a view of this kind of wetland lake area behind me here. So anyhow, yeah, I think more and more of this kind of unused forested area on the outskirts keeps getting converted into apartment blocks and all. You can kind of just see behind me, there's a whole big apartment area being put in. This area kind of over to my left, Matisha and all that area is already turning into a big city, and it's just kind of expanding outwards, this little kind of like satellite city right outside the city limits. They'll probably get incorporated into Moscow at some point. But yeah, meanwhile, as I was kind of predicting, right, as they're Pam Bondi and them are announcing more going after people from the Obama administration, the pushback on the Epstein stuff came right on schedule, right? I think it was CNN was put out a whole article reporting on the fact that, right, you had the Deputy AG meeting with Maxwell for like the better part of like 2 days, these big long meetings. They're saying, well, this all actually sounds very suspicious. And then she gets sent to this minimum security prison. And now they're talking about releasing the transcripts from the meeting. Now, of course, this transcripts is not a video of the meeting. It could be doctored anyway. Admittedly, if they let out the video too, there might just be a missing minute or two, that as well. But they're wanting to release the transcripts, and as CNN is, I think, trying to encourage the process along themselves, but they're saying, well, if they do that, it's just going to fuel more suspicion that this odd meeting happened. Like, why would someone meet with this convicted felon? Why would somebody of this importance meet with this convicted felon for such a long amount of time? And now they're going to release this transcript. Instead of doing away with suspicion, it's just going to add more suspicion, because how might they have changed said transcript, right? And of course, I think CNN is trying to make sure that suspicion happens. So, shots fired in returning fire, I guess, right? Go after the Democrats, they're going back after the Republicans, and at the same time, I also feel vindicated because the article's still trying to be like, well, but there's not really going to be anything in it, but there might be some stuff about Trump. So they were both trying to minimize Epstein's importance, but also maximize why it's important for the Trump administration. Yeah, this is all a giant weird poker game going on, I swear. Meanwhile, Washington Post put out an article about saying that this was obviously special treatment, having Maxwell move to this country club prison, as they referenced it. Let me see here. I actually have the quote here. They had, interviewed someone in the warden in the, I don't know, it was like, I think it was in Denver, maximum security prison, Denver State, whatever, saying, and this person was quite frustrated. So it's talking about this prison in Texas. They're saying it's a country club. Inmates, if they have a sex offense, are not going to a place like that, period. It's truly unheard of. And then they point out, the Washington Post points out, right, long-standing policy from the Federal Bureau of Prisons restricts inmates with certain elevated security classifications known as, quote, public safety factors from serving in federal prison camps. Sex offenses are among the most severe. Maxwell's convicted in 2021 of helping Epstein groom and traffic. Yep, we got that idea. Inmates serving sentences of 10 years or more generally aren't eligible for transfer to minimum security facilities either. So not only are the crimes she was convicted of give her these risk factors that she shouldn't have gone there, the length of her sentence would have also excluded her. So, some sort of strange preferential treatment. And then Trump won't rule out a pardon for this person? Oh my goodness. Meanwhile, yeah. So the war is just escalating, right? Bondi moving forward. I'm hearing today here. Trying not to break my neck going down here. It's a little slippery on here. My tennis shoes are getting a little bit old. I gotta get some more better traction on here. Escalating. Meanwhile, here in Russian news, we've had. I saw a piece just recently, a big sort of study they released trying to check the cybersecurity of a whole bunch of different companies. They were doing kind of white hat attacks to see how good their systems were, and a lot of the retail companies did not come away with flying colors. But on the upside, a lot of the banks and financial institutions were quite hard to do anything with. I'm just seeing there's a lot of concern now everywhere about the hacking stuff. I don't think it's a coincidence coming after the things, right? Maybe the things said by Britain's defense minister, the Aeroflot hack. Yeah, Ukraine's in desperation mode. They're now trying to do literally anything they can. One other piece of news I just have to laugh at a tiny bit here. This is just kind of a little insight and stuff in Russia and all. Is they were passing a new law on blocking spam calls and spam texts here in Russia because so they're now even going to count like bank verification codes. They can still count as spam too, and they're automatically blocked. So you have to go in to your phone's like settings, and you have to go and like reach out and okay them to send you verification codes and all, because apparently people are so angry about their spam, there's been a call to get rid of it at all costs. And the spam might include those, like your bank verification codes and stuff like that. So, yeah, getting a lot stricter on what counts as spam and how it's supposed to be blocked, and you can't be messaging people, texting them. Now, the thing about this, though, that I have to point out is, having been here now for 9-10 months, this go around, like, I get a spam call or text every couple of weeks, like 3 or 4 weeks maybe. And people will always tell me, it's like, man, I'm getting so sick of so many spam things. And compared to the US, where it's like I get a call every single day, multiple calls a day, text. We're having a time where my phone blew up and I had like 5 calls in a row. It was just like determined to get me to answer to this spam call. You know, it's just by comparison, it's absolutely nothing. So I just find everything's perspective. In the US, I guess we've kind of just gotten used to all the spam calls. Whereas here, apparently, a call or a text a week is just like this radical invasion of your personal space or something. How dare you invade my digital space? Oh, man. Meanwhile, Russian media was definitely making sure to emphasize some of the stories I was saying, that Trump in his recent press conference discussion mentioned that he's, it's doubling down on the old narrative of the Ukraine thing. It's Biden's war and he wants to get us out. He's just trying to make peace and get us out, right? Get that man a Nobel Peace Prize. as soon as he brings back those nuclear submarines from throwing a fit over a Twitter exchange. As soon as he stops threatening nuclear war over a Twitter argument, get him a Peace Prize. Anyway, so I think there's some hopeful optimism between the Witkoff thing and these statements he's recently made, but I'm going to be honest, I think people should dial back their expectations. Even if he's feeling like making peace today, he's going to talk to Lindsey Graham at some point. Whatever Lindsey Graham says apparently goes at this point. Like, Lindsey Graham has this, like, magical ability. It's like from the old Harry Potter movies or something, and he cast that Imperious curse or whatever it is and make people do whatever he says. Apparently has it for Trump. Just no matter how dumb the idea, or actually I shouldn't say no matter, it's like especially. If the dumber the idea, the more potent it is when he tells it to him, apparently. Maybe that's like his special, like, superpower or something, right? He has this ability to make the dumbest ideas sound enthralling to anyone who's in power in the Republican Party. Maybe that's it. That's it. So I would probably suggest modulating my expectations. But I'm not opposed to the idea that this could be a positive sign. Maybe he is getting fed up and ready to throw up his hands and be done. He sounds a bit defeated on the sanctions thing, right? When he was asked recently, and he was like, yeah, we're going to pass sanctions, but I don't think he, meaning President Putin, I don't think he cares or he's that worried about it. So it sounds like he's already decided it's not going to have that much of effect. So, I mean, that does raise the question, bypass the sanctions at all, you know, if they're not going to have an effect, but they are going to just hurt global economy, or, you know, even we import some of our uranium and stuff from Russia. It's like, why pass them? But, so, I don't know. Maybe Trump's just getting a little depressed with the whole thing, but I still wouldn't hold my breath that he suddenly becomes super rational and gets things under control after how much he's spun back and forth. At this point, I just kind of believe it when I see it. And I don't even necessarily believe it when I see it, because all his deadlines and things he decides also change. So, I don't even know what to believe at this point. Eyes, ears, I'm running out of senses to believe, so I'll believe it when I believe it, I guess. Anyway, I'm gonna end it there. Enjoying this, like, absolutely gorgeous weather. We had rain yesterday. It's kind of cleared up a little bit. No. Yeah, we had some rain yesterday. Kind of cleared up. It's got that kind of crispness. It's not too humid here. Just feels kind of nice and comfortable right now. I think next time I might walk further up that way, a little further outside of Moscow. It gets kind of a little bit more neighborhoody kind of direction. That direction's more city, so yeah, I might have my plan for one of these next ones, so I'm not always doing the same place. All right, that's all for today. Y'all have a good one.